You're listening to the Bitching and Bolusing podcast with Courtney and Brittany. Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Bitching and Bolusing podcast. I'm Brittany.
And I'm Courtney. Today we have another amazing guest, Greg from AdaptedDesign. Greg is a father of a disabled child and a registered architect who uses his design background to design and fabricate adapted design solutions to help with therapy, learning, and play. Nearly a year ago, Greg created AdaptedDesign to share his creations on Instagram. However, the account has since evolved to also provide adapting tutorials, park reviews for accessibility and inclusion, and creating memes as a way to bring humor and understanding to this complex medical experience we are all navigating. Greg's here to chat with us about his goals for AdaptedDesign and what his journey has been like thus far. Thank you so much, Greg, for taking some time to chat with us today. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I figured since there might be listeners out there that don't follow AdaptedDesign, and since your Instagram account really does focus strictly on accessibility in parks and adapting items and such like that, I thought maybe we could start with you giving us a little bit more backstory about how you kind of ended up where you are now.
Yeah, I started out learning about switches through my daughter's therapy, and we started out with one switch, and I was frustrated because we were only offered one switch and I wanted a second switch. So as soon as I went online to find out how much the same switch was going to cost, I got really upset because it was $75. And so with a lot of things, frustration is sort of the catalyst for innovation. So I figured out how to make switches, bought a 3D printer, started taking apart things, and that's where some of those initial creations came from, just me sort of figuring out how to make a switch and seeing how I could make them for a lot less than $75, and started to share that with people because I thought maybe other people would like to not spend $75 on a silly little switch, because at that point my daughter was starting to use both hands to do switches, and so I thought I don't want to limit her with her therapies, and so whatever she needs I would get for her, but there had to be a better way than just buying $75 switches just to have therapy.
You actually just bring up a really good point. That shock of when you start looking into what adapted items look like and how expensive they are. And I'm sure you probably have even other revelations about adaptive equipment and toys. But I know for me, that was mind-blowing the first time I went to like a Rehab Mart or one of those websites that has like all these adaptive toys. Because when we first started looking, we had gotten some switches from therapy and like early intervention. So we had a bunch of variation of switches, but now I needed to plug them into things. Mm-hmm. So I had all the switches and I was like, okay, awesome. Like let's use these. But I mean, some of them are insane. I was looking at one the other day because my son Lino loves music. So I was like, okay, I got to get this kid some like music instruments or something where he can really engage better with it. And they had one kit, I think it was on Rehab Mart. It was like $800. $800. And they're like kids' toys. Yeah. We're not talking about like a real like Fender guitar or anything. They're like kids' toys. And they're like, yeah, $800 for this lot of fake drums and a fake guitar. And like, I'm like, are you serious right now? What were some of the other things that you were just like, what the heck?
The toys were a big thing because we had like the one from the therapist, and I was like, well, I want to have her try out things that do different songs or different lights, and to be able to have options meant spending hundreds of dollars on these toys that actually cost $30 originally. So that pissed me off. So I started opening up toys and figuring out how to adapt these things. I never planned on selling these for profit or anything like that. It was always like I felt like there was gatekeepers hiding adapting, or making it sound like it was difficult. But with my tutorials, I just want to show people that it's not difficult and you could do it yourself. And if you're a person who likes to tinker, you could make a business just doing this for people, because there's definitely a need, and I really hope people aren't spending $800 on something that never should have been that much in the first place, because it's, at the end of the day, it's a cord and some solder.
Yeah.
And so I hope that my tutorials are giving people, empowerment to adapt or feel like they could, or just know that they shouldn't pay exorbitant prices for something that's very simple. And I hope with some of the giveaways I've done and other things that just putting toys in people's hands that don't have a whole range of toys. Like there are people that still only have kind of one Switch adapted toy because of cost.
Yeah.
Things like that are upsetting. I think there should be lots of access to these things, and price shouldn't be the thing that keeps people from having those opportunities.
I think too it does so much for the kids, but it also does so much for the parents too, right? Because Greg, I actually am a customer. And Greg had Switch adapted a knitting machine for Cyrus. And when I was pregnant with Cyrus, like I've been knitting since, oh gosh, I don't even know. I was like 12 maybe. My Nana taught me. And so it was always kind of my dream to like pass that on to my kids type of thing, or at least like do it with them. And then Cyrus was born, and then there was kind of like the realization of like, well, like he's never really going to be able to do the two-hand knitting type of thing. And so I found the machine, and it was always kind of like, how do I adapt this to him? Because this seems doable, but like, I don't know. And so I reached out to Greg, and Greg was like, yep, I can try it. And Greg, I think it was like within 2 days you sent me the video that it was working, and I literally cried. 'Cause I was like, I can do this now with my son. And it just opened up like this whole world of like, I can now share what I love to do. And it's not a toy, I know like we're talking a lot about toys, but Greg also Switch adapts other things for like functional use, like a knitting machine. And so Cyrus made his first hat.
Aww.
And he's very excited to make more. And pretty much everyone's getting hats for Christmas, just so you know. But I think that it's so good for the kids because it adds this level of inclusion and accessibility for them. But also, like, I know I see a lot during the holidays especially, and, Greg, Courtney, I don't know if you see it too, but a lot of people post online or will talk maybe behind the scenes about how affected they get around the holidays, knowing that their kids can't necessarily play with toys that are made for their age range. And I think, I think that there's something to be said about, like, we can't force our children into, like, this idea of what we had for them if they weren't disabled. And, like, if your kid's happy with a toy that's made for an infant, then let them be happy. Like, Cyrus's favorite toy is a little suction cup toy that he just spins around in circles.
Oh, my God,
I'm like,
yeah.
Love it. Like, it's the best thing. But I think it opens up this world for parents to not have to feel such weight that comes with knowing that your child can't play with toys the way that they might be able to within their age range, and to give them the chance to have certain toys that are maybe more suitable for their age that are then Switch adapted. It's a big deal. Like, it's a very big deal. And it lifts like this, I don't know, gray cloud off of parents, I feel. And to be able to give your kid a toy that maybe they're seeing their peers play with, and now they get to play with because it's adapted for them, is a huge deal. So it's like not just for the kids, but it's for the parents too.
And I love the knitting machine is because it gives independence to create something.
Yes.
There's not just a novelty to it; it's actually creating something. And this could be something that they continue to do for the rest of their life. Like that, this could be their thing, knitting or creating friendship bracelets or whatnot. So I really love these not non-toy adaptations because they're giving autonomy to make something, to do something that is special, to actually be able to create something that is physical.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. It's so appropriate for anybody, right? Like, I mean, I used to love handmade gifts for people during the holidays, and as an adult I still do. Like, I'm still like, I'm not spending money, but I'll make you something. And
those are the best gifts, though.
They are the best gifts, right? And I think kids really love doing that. And we've always tried to foster that with Cyrus, right? Like hand over hand painting. And like, I remember one year we kind of put like these beaded necklaces in a big bin and like let him kind of just mess them around and paint. And we're like, oh, he painted these necklaces for people. But you're so right to give them that autonomy to create something that's purely their own, because Cyrus does it all by himself and he picks out the colors. I give him some options. I was like, do you want this color yarn? Do you want green? Do you want red? And he like picks out the color, and then he'll like knit a certain amount of rows, and then he'll stop and he'll look at me and I was like, do you want to switch colors? And he'll pick out another color. And so he's making these striped hats all by himself, and like the amount of pride he had after that first hat, like I'm gonna like well up talking about it. Aww. But he was so proud of himself that he got to do this all by himself. And I mean, there's like, I still have to help him a little bit with like, you know, taking it off of the machine and putting it on, but it's 3 steps that I help him with, and the rest is all by himself.
And I also love the fact that adapting items, not just toys, anything, opens up the range of what these kids can explore and figure out what they like. Because that's always been another part of this whole element for me especially, is when I do want something adapted for Lino, I'm so limited. And I'm like, I don't even know if he'll like that. And it's like, you're going to dish out all this money for something that your kid might have no interest in whatsoever. And this kind of opens that door to be like, okay, well, anything can pretty much be adapted. That mindset, it really does change how you think about what you can allow your child to engage with. And I also think you bringing up the holidays was another thing that I love, with opening it up to that a family member could just go to a store and be like, oh, let's say we're talking about Lino. Oh, this electric piano, I think Lino would like this. Mm-hmm. They could just get it and adapt it. It doesn't have to be like, oh, well, it's not adapted, so he can't have it. This freedom of what you're trying to do, Greg, with adapted designs, really, it frees families and it frees these kids and all disabled people for that matter. Your designs are not just meant to be tailored for children. It's meant to create independence for any disabled person. And I just think this is the kind of change we need to see. This is something that needs to happen, because there is this gatekeeper element that's really incredibly frustrating and so annoying. Like when I first found out how cheap it is to do this, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I don't understand. It's so wild, but I just love that it opens the door for so many things, you know? I mean, how many times prior to you getting that knitting machine were you ever truly thinking, oh, one day Cyrus will be able to knit, prior to realizing, you know, just that simple thought that, oh my God, my son can do this and I can do it with him. That's amazing. That really is.
Yeah. And Greg, you don't just adapt like toys and switches and stuff like that. You also make a lot of functional pieces through 3D printing and things like that. I kind of was like stalking your Instagram a little bit, and I think you were tagged in it. Like you had made a piece that goes onto a splashy chair for like a shower head, right? So you do things like that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've kind of pivoted a little bit away from switches and voice buttons and things to right now only producing sort of functional items, like the suction pump clip for the tip is super popular. That made me so frustrated. This silly tip that has nowhere to go, so you're either putting it into something, you know, gross little pocket, or it's falling on the floor. And this little clip has been a game changer for us. We put it on like the stroller, we put it on the cart, and you know, people are sharing how they're using them, and it's a silly little thing that's been 3D printed, but it's a game changer in terms of just like not having a conniption about the tip falling on the floor again. Things with like the feeding pump, you know, I made a clip. You can clip the thing onto a backpack strap when it's not in use, so it's not falling on the ground. You know, there's silly little things like you never would think about, but the equipment is designed so poorly.
Yeah.
And so little adaptations like a clip can be very helpful, just like the shower handle holder. That we have the same issue, and actually it was a great idea because that thing's always falling off and hitting the tub or
oh my God,
turning upside down.
Everything, yeah.
And then the startle reflex comes in.
So bad.
It's a whole thing, right?
What I like about some of these more functional creations is I think I would be doing them anyway.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. I was kind of realizing that it's not really novel that I'm creating things to solve problems, but they are problems that I would be solving anyway, regardless of what it was. And so it's nothing unique to the situation. I would always be trying to take stuff apart. But I think the difference is I feel sharing this helps other people more than I think other things would. And so that's kind of why I'm enjoying using my platform to show people that things could be better or things could be easier just by a few adjustments.
Just makes it more functional.
Yeah.
And life too, right?
And I will take anything that will make my life even just an inkling easier. So those little things like you're talking about, something as simple as just a clip to hold something on a machine that we use daily. I know that might sound so minimal to some people who don't live this life, but it's actually huge. It really is huge. And I love the fact that, you're saying you would be doing this no matter what. So it's really just it's so great to be able to share that, and also to get I'm also thinking maybe some ideas from other people, like being like, oh, could you make something that does this? And you're like, oh yeah, totally, that's a great idea. I think that's such a wonderful thing. What are some of the other, I guess, hopes you have for adapted design? That how you're just saying your journey has shifted already a little bit, just from kind of switches and stuff to more functional items. And where do you hope to go with all of this?
The shift, I think, has kind of come around my daughter's health. It's been kind of declining over the past year. And so a lot of the things that I was initially making for her, she's not able to use right now. So, generating a lot of these things for her to test is kind of hard because she's not able to test them. So my focus has kind of moved more to the community and creating things for other people, being a resource for people. You mentioned people bringing ideas to me. I love when people bring ideas to me or commissions, because it gets my mind going. And I'm so motivated to solve these problems. That's why my turnaround was so quick with the knitting machine, because it was a great idea, and I just wanted to get it out and have you making things as soon as possible. And so I think my focus now is really to try to help other people and just see if there's ways that I can be a resource and use what I've learned to teach other people how to do this, or just to give people some inspiration to find items that could be adapted that could change their lives.
It definitely improves quality of life so much for anyone who's using it. And it's funny because you did the knitting machine, and now I'm thinking of other things Cyrus loves to do, right? And I'm he loves to bake. What can we adapt for him? And little things like that, because I know we've said it a couple times already, but it's not just toys. It's just giving them the independence to learn what they love to do, and whether that's you've made the bead machine and the knitting machine, and whether it's baking or music, or just because they're still people, they're still kids, they're still adults, they still have interests, and it's really hard to figure that out and what their interests are when they can't easily access the things that would help them develop that interest. And especially Lino and Cyrus, they're non-speaking, so they can't just be I want to do this.
Yeah.
It's tough because we can't just be dropping all this money to really figure out what they like to do. It's the $800.
It's a small fortune. It's a small fortune if you want to try to do that.
And then they never want to do it again, and you're wow.
Yeah. Fabulous. But I've been following you, Greg, for pretty much, I feel almost the start of your account. I feel I was one of the early followers.
I think I was too.
But your account has really become something, it really is something special, and I love what you've done to it, because you have It did start where it was more kind of straightforward with your like adapting things, but now it's really evolved to something that is very community oriented, and it's such a fun place. Like, I love seeing your memes.
The memes.
Yeah, like, but it's such a fun little mix of your perspective, and I just love that it's become this place to be also a support on top of these other things. What are some of the biggest challenges you've experienced prior to having a public account? What were some of the challenges you kind of felt as a dad, just kind of going through this muck of a life sometimes, when you got to get through all the red tape of all the BS and super expensive adapted things? What were some of the things that you're kind of hoping to be more supportive for other parents now?
Yeah, so my daughter was born like right before the start of the pandemic. So her entire life has been stuck in this bubble. And because of her medical complications, we've kind of stayed in this bubble. And so we're super isolated from other families. We don't have very much family nearby, so there isn't very much of a village. And there's no community outside of the home because we've been stuck inside for almost 4 years. So the account is also kind of a way, just to kind of be part of a community, we can't find in the physical space. And unfortunately, we still haven't found that, even though we're almost 4 years into this. So it's been wonderful. I think the interesting thing is that the memes kind of came as a sort of a cathartic exercise, because I was getting so frustrated with things, and I needed an outlet to be creative. And the memes actually created the most conversation on Adapted Design. People, reaching out, saying it's hilarious, or that I feel you, and these have created some connections with people that I don't think other things that I've done had the same impact. Like, people are tired and frustrated, and the system is very stacked against you, and feeding pumps are stupid, and like these
Yes.
these things can unite people, regardless of where you are in the world. And I've enjoyed being able to create those conversations just over like people's frustrations over silly things. And like I said, it's been cathartic for me to just go through, how to lampoon the insurance companies, and just poke fun at them, and just vent generally. There's still no necessarily a community that I hope that we could have someday, but the online community has been great because we've just sort of coalesced around these venting sessions through memes. So that's been a fun addition to the account, just to create community.
Yeah, it's tricky because I feel like probably Brittany and I are exactly the same, in the sense that we have created some really strong bonds online. Brittany and I, we're an online bond. Yes, we've met in person, but
we first met online. Yes.
And we are a few states away, and I think we go through the same challenge. Though I do feel I have somewhat of a support now, especially Brittany is really like, she's my crutch for sure. But there's still this physical in-person element that's missing. There's no real community in the sense that, like, oh, hey, let's just take our kids and go here today, or hey, like, I need to come over, have a glass of wine and cry. I can't do any of those things, and I definitely relate to that, because it's so hard when you are still extraordinarily isolated in the real world. There is some community and some exposure to connect online 100%, but you're still, stuck at home most of the time, and that is one of the hardest parts about this. No matter how much we fight, we still feel like we're so secluded and so isolated from everything. And again, I had this recent experience, not that it's a new experience, but I took my little one, who's almost 2, I took him to our local park while Lino is at school. And all I could think about was just how, if Lino was with us, we wouldn't even be here, because there's nothing for Lino to do at our closest park. And that's the type of thing that stops you from having community. Like when I was there with just Luca, I was talking to other mothers. But it's also really hard to fully relate to these other mothers because they're not seeing it from the lens of a mother who has another child who is often not included. So it's like you might find sometimes where you can relate a little bit or kind of socialize or get into it, but you're still always forever isolated. So I think Brittany would probably agree that she feels very similar from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, even I think finding a community within the community is really challenging because I think that there's such a spectrum of like how people see disability, how they see their child's disability, right? And it's, I mean, we're exposed to a lot of other families through therapies. And I still 4.5 years in have not really made any like deep in-person connections despite all of the people that I've met in person. And so I think that that's a huge challenge because I think particularly like all three of us are kind of on the same level of like how we see things. And I feel like that's kind of the minority within the community. So it's so challenging because there's so much that can make it really difficult to just find someone that you can really vibe with. And so it's kind of like the beauty of social media, right? Is like you can find someone across states that you're like, yes, I agree with your viewpoints on the whole parenting a child with disabilities situation, but it's still challenging. I mean, it's tough. I mean, Courtney, it took us, we've always had a sort of connection, but it wasn't really until, a few years ago that we like really, really started having a connection. So, I mean, it was the first like 2 years of just trudging through it all alone. And I think people don't really realize that. And like, hey, bless the ones that have a big community and like, like good for them. But it's not the reality for everyone, especially when you're isolating. It's so hard.
Especially when you're a man. Do you find that, Greg? Like as a father, it's even more difficult to find connections in person. I know my husband struggles with it a lot. So I don't know if it's similar to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the audience for adaptive design trends very female.
Yep, that's the online way, apparently.
Well, that's it, yeah.
And in clinic, there isn't too much visibility of fathers doing this stuff, and I think that with my wife and I, we have the exact same role with taking care of our daughter. There was no discontinuity in care if someone's away or someone's unable to do it, and I feel like there certainly are dads out there that are doing that, but there are still many that aren't even aware of what the doctors are or even what the condition is, and I think if adapting is the thing that helps them access some way to help with therapy or something. If there's something that another dad could teach a dad that can help them access a way to care for their kid or to give them some sort of experience. I mean, hopefully that's something that I'm also able to do as a father. But I try to tailor my comments or my memes to be not father specific and not father of a child specific. It's really this greater community of people that are all ages and all different levels of complexity, and so hopefully it reaches people regardless of whether or not they're a father or a mother, but just that they're a human who's caring for someone or in a tough situation.
I do think it's very unfair how like there are so many dads out there that do the same level of care as moms. Yeah. And there's just such a lack of community, I feel like, for dads. And there's a even bigger lack of representation, I feel like, on social media, especially. And I don't know, maybe it's like not to be gender specific or anything like that, but maybe women just need to share that a little bit more to heal from trauma. But I think that it does leave like, this huge empty space for dads. I know that there's some accounts, right? There's like the Hope for HIE. I think there's like a father
Yeah, they have
group
a
for
dad specific, yeah.
But like Kyle, I think, is in it, and he's like, "Oh, it's kind of quiet."
It's very quiet. Stefano's in it as well, and it's incredibly quiet. There's just crickets all day.
Yeah, but I think that there's still like, as a mom, I can't speak from a dad's perspective, but as a mom, having like, there's like there's like 6 of us, maybe 7 of us that like are really kind of, we're in a little group together, and like we all text each other, and having that just to be like, hey, I'm having a really shitty day, helps. And there's just like, it's not there for dads, and it's so tough because I just don't think that there's any representation for fathers. The ones that care to a level the same as the moms, we need to like really boost those guys up, because I talk about it all the time, how like I could just leave the house for a month and the kids would be fine. Yeah. And like I feel like the only representation I hear about dads is like, oh, my big blubbering husband that doesn't do anything. And it's like, no, it's not just that. And so that's always made me really upset.
I think we're always fighting that old-fashioned stereotype too. It's always just lingering. Like, the family dynamic should never be so divided that a wife and a husband are completely doing completely different things and not equally sharing the load. I'm sorry, but I don't know if that'll cause a ripple in society, but it's true. It shouldn't be like that. And I think there is so many men now in this more modern era that are taking on more. And I think Brittany's right. There's just a lack of exposure to that still. You're sitting here, Greg, with us, and you're saying like there's really been no difference between you and your wife. And that's actually the function of many, many households, but it's still like sort of hidden and not talked about, or it's like, oh, well, my dad didn't do that, or my husband doesn't do that. And it's like, what are we doing here? And I think you do an amazing job though with your account, because you don't try to isolate it either way. Your content really is very, if you are in this life of just kind of dealing with insurance and all the BS of all the, feeding pumps, all of that. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman on the other side, or how you even reference yourself. You're going to relate with that. And I think that's a great way to approach social media these days, because sometimes it is too targeted, and it isolates us even more within the community, which we all know. We don't need any more isolation. That's for damn sure. So I say kudos to you, Craig.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned like the content is so specific, because like as a father in this community, all the memes that I see generated by other people are just about moms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I can't really reshare that because I'm not a mom, or it's super specific, or it's only tailored in a language that person who's female would identify with it. And even just that, like if sharing a meme that's cathartic is a way for a father to have some sort of voice, or to express some sort of feeling, they're not really out there, because every single meme is talking about a mother's perspective. And so hopefully, I don't necessarily have too many dads reposting stuff, but if there are dads out there, I mean, I hope that the neutral language in the things that I post give you the ability to feel like you can vent about something. And creators, it'd be great to be more neutral with your language, because it's a wide spectrum of people that are taking care of people, and just tailing it to moms or is very limiting, especially if we're trying to get dads to be more open about how they're feeling and express their thoughts about the whole experience.
Now I have a question, and this is just me. You said you like when people come up to you with ideas, and I feel like
I'm just sitting. I'm just gonna sit back and wait for.
Bear with me. I feel that you bring up a good point where men tend to tinker, right? Whether it's a coping mechanism, whether it's doing things that help men bond with their children more. I think adapting things is a way to really help men especially bond with their kids, right? Because there's the whole thing, like, you know, there's like dads bond with their kids by like teaching them how to play catch and stuff like that. And so, you know, moms bond with their kids in a different way. And when that piece is missing for dads, it can be tough. And so I think like teaching fathers especially how to tinker and adapt and do things like that, like, it's a great way to help dads bond. And so here's my question. Would you ever consider, because I know, like, specifically my husband would really enjoy doing something like this, but would you ever consider hosting almost like a virtual workshop live where other dads can register and like join you, where you can teach them live how to like either do 3D printing or switch adapting or anything like that? Because my husband has never switch adapted, but he's 3D printed a couple things. Like he 3D printed like a joystick for Cyrus's electric wheelchair. And just to kind of like, I don't want to like specifically say it's for dads, but to bring that community together of dads to help them learn how to do things that could open up further bonding with their children. Just like sitting here with you, I feel like that would be a great opportunity for everybody, because you're very easy to talk to and you're very knowledgeable with all of these things.
It's a great idea. I've considered it before. I think part of my hang up is that I'm pretty private. You know, no one's really ever seen my face on AdaptedDesign. You know, my daughter isn't on social media, and so I think it's been interesting, sort of not really hiding behind the account, but just kind of being
anonymous.
Being an anonymous resource to help people. Which is interesting because people have, you know, put their trust in me, and I think without seeing my face, and I'd love to be able to help more people, and I think it's just balancing how exposed I am and things like that, and not showing too much of my life until I'm, you know, more comfortable, if that ever happens. But I love the idea of having a more one-to-one kind of demonstration of things, to just, again, another way of making it more accessible to people. Because you're right, because the cliche is like the dad will go into the garage to get away from things and you know, putter, and maybe has frustrations that like, well, I won't be able to make this treehouse because they won't be able to enjoy it. But if you just shifted 1 degree to one direction, you could be adapting a toy, and that could be your gateway into being part of your child's life.
And playing with it with your kids. Like, that's kind of a big thing. I find that I tend to be the researcher in the relationship, where, like, you know, I'll research the Switch adapted toys, and, like, the same thing with the knitting machine and stuff like that. And I think that because I'm the one putting that work in, I then tend to be the one that bonds with Cyrus over it, right? Like, I'm the one that's playing with him and things like that. Maybe because my husband doesn't necessarily, like, pick out which toys, you know, type of thing. And so I think that that's kind of, it would just be so good, because it would allow fathers specifically to pick out something that isn't Switch adapted and to say, like, hey, let's make this work, right? And I think that it gives them a little bit more incentive to want to use these types of equipments with their children.
Yeah, I think everybody needs an outlet, and this could potentially be like a huge outlet, you know, for anyone to bond. I know we're specifically talking about men, but I'm the tinkerer in my relationship. I am the one taking apart everything. It is what I do. So for me, I know specifically my husband, that wouldn't be his outlet, but it would be awesome for me. I'd be on that live.
And that's the thing. And like, if you had questions, you could ask questions, or even if it is a one-on-one type of thing, because I'm kind of a tinkerer too, like, not so much with Cyrus's stuff, but like before Cyrus was born, I was always like specifically Halloween decorations, like tinkering and taking things apart and like whatever. But there are a lot of things like, I don't know, I need a little extra help. And so if if it were a one-on-one, I could be like, am I doing something wrong? And it takes off that pressure because my anxiety, guys, like I need the helping hand to guide me through these things. Because then I start sweating and I'm like, if I mess this up, it would be a great resource for everybody involved because I think we need that. And I think there is a huge amount of gatekeeping going on. I know that there's, I think, one other place that does tutorials on how to do it, but it's hard to find because I know Courtney in our group, people have said like, oh, where's the place that you can go like years ago for the tutorials and just to like not have it so hidden and closed off and yeah.
It's not necessarily a unique idea that it's never been done before, but the more people that are doing it, I think is super helpful. And, you know, with the holidays coming up, I'm totally on board if you decide to do any sort of
me too.
I mean, you do have tutorials, to be fair. There are tutorials on your actual Instagram. They're just not like a live or like a spoken sort of tutorial. Like you're kind of showing it. But do you have anything planned with like the holidays coming up, or are you getting lots of requests for things yet?
Pretty open slate right now. I would be happy to take anyone's commission for adapting challenge, and I think foremost for me is like I am not trying to make money off of any of these endeavors. Yeah. Like this is just a passion of mine to make it super easy for people to get adapted things. The tutorials, like you said, it's I'm not the first person to ever do a switch adapting tutorial, but I'm trying to make it as accessible as possible, not hiding it behind a link or something, but it's right there. You just can watch it.
Exactly.
You don't have to go to a website or anything. Like it always felt so hidden, when I was trying to learn about it myself. And so this is just me trying to break that gatekeeping aspect of something so simple, but also so impactful. So yeah, if there's anything that people are interested in switch adapting, I'd be happy to look into it, and I will not try to make any money off of it. It's really just for me to be able to see someone open up something that they never thought that they could do, like knitting a hat or a scarf. I just love seeing that.
I love it so much, and just the fact that you don't just focus on toys is such a huge deal for me. That's so big because I know that there are places out there that do a lot of focus specifically on toys, and I remember like once I tried to look into seeing if I could have like a stand mixer almost adapted for Cyrus because he loves baking, and the only thing I could find was you plug it into the wall and then like it turns on and off, like the actual plug turns on, and it was like $400. And I was like, I can't spend this for like, I bake with him maybe once every other month. Like, this is insane. And so just to know that you're here to say like, hey, this is a little bit more functional. It's not necessarily just a toy, and that you're willing to take on those challenges instead of just saying, well, buy a $400 plug switch. It's a big deal for families out there. So we thank you very much for doing all of this for these kids and these families, because we need more Gregs in the world.
Yes, we do. Before we kind of end today's episode, I just wanted to touch on one more thing with you, Greg. The whole inclusive playground and accessibility vibe you got going on. See, I know like you've been going, I'm guessing, local parks that you've been kind of going to and then rating them. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So because we've been so isolated, we don't really get to parks very often, and because of my daughter's disability, there's very little at a conventional park that she can participate in. And so we really didn't seek out parks specifically for her play. We really just go for walks and things.
Yeah.
But, she's at a size and an age where there might be some things that she could do. And the catalyst for the reviews was we saw this article for a nearby park that was the new inclusive park for this town. And so we were like, let's go check it out. And we got there, and the first thing, the parking lot didn't have any striped accessibility parking.
Oh my God.
Bad start.
So the bad start. Then there wasn't even a curb cut from the parking lot surface to the walk path.
Oh my God, face palm. What the heck?
So the wheelchair couldn't. We had to do the whole tippy thing
Pop
with
a
the
wheelie,
wheelchair.
yeah.
Papa Wheelie.
The path was old asphalt that had lots of roots and things, and so it wasn't a great walk. Once we got to the playground, it was the smallest little postage stamp of an inclusive playground. And
oh my God.
the closest thing they had was one of those saucer things, but saucer things aren't great for someone who has low tone because they're just laying on the saucer.
Yeah.
And I don't think they even had one of those inclusive swings, but those are usually way bigger than she is, so you'd have to have another chair to pat it, and
exactly,
I think,
yeah.
and a lot of them don't have the harness across the front. So we got there and this is a waste of our time. No, there's nothing she can use, and it's not even an accessible way to get to this park. And so that kind of frustration again created this opportunity to sort of evaluate these parks that call themselves inclusive, and show people that if you really have limitations, these aren't inclusive in any way. But we have gone to a couple of parks deliberately and have said they're inclusive, and they have been, and they're amazing. And I think it's interesting. We have a few data points, and it's certain cities that are excelling. Some cities are doing terrible, and I think it's really down to the leaders in these towns really making an effort to be inclusive and be accessible. And it's unfortunate when we go to these places that I have a lot of 1-star parks that I've reviewed, and some are inclusive, are supposed to be inclusive, and they're not.
Yeah. You bring up a really great point that I think the majority of the general public definitely don't consider, is that when a park is said to have been inclusive, even if it has an inclusive element in the park, meaning there's an inclusive playground ride, or a swing,
Easy.
even if it has that one thing, to get into the park is also part of the inclusion part.
Wow.
And I think a lot of people do forget that. And I do think that's just wild. The first park you're talking about, that really there was no actual way to even get in the park. So fail immediately right there.
Ours is like that. Our local one, there's just no way to get the wheelchair in, and they only have 2 adapted swings, and somebody came through and cut off all of the safety harness for the swings.
Oh, hooray.
And I've emailed the whoever, I don't know, Parks and Rec person, and they never responded, and the swings are still busted. So yeah, that's one more hurdle that we have to face as parents.
And I hate the idea that there are cities or towns or local governments that are like, oh, but it is inclusive just because there's one damn swing.
And wood chips.
Get the fuck out of here with this bullshit. Yeah. But they use it as this ploy.
Yeah.
And that's even more frustrating, because it's we're fighting and fighting and fighting. And they're like, oh, but this park is inclusive. And it's like, well, that's bullshit, because your version of inclusion is not inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's just accessibility with the ADA. It's a bare minimum that they're meeting.
Yeah.
One swing, it's not really inclusive. Even one swing's not inclusive, because we've been to parks where there's one swing, and there are kids that aren't necessarily targeted for that use, and they're using it, or they're misusing it, and you can't use it. Yeah. So it becomes a thing that isn't inclusive because it's not available to you, and there's not enough options that are also inclusive. They get so much praise for doing something that's inclusive, and the newspapers pick it up, and that's the reason why we even went to this park in the first place, is because it was getting so much positive press that it was inclusive. And if you look at Google reviews for parks, every park has 4.4 stars, but who is that for? And
exactly.
There's certainly are 4.4 stars that got 1 star on my rating system, because they might be an excellent park for half the population, but the other half, it's really not inclusive or accessible at all.
Yeah, it's such a facade. I can't stand it. And the one swing really drives me crazy, not to really drill this to the ground. But kids navigate to that swing naturally because it's like
Yeah,
the one
a
thing that
different-
pops out. Yes. And that's what even hurts me more because I end up at these parks. The local park I was just talking about, that's our closest park. It's so super close. It's like around the block from us. It has the one swing, right? And every time we go there, there's always kids just like they're taking turns going on it. And the thing is I start getting angry with the parents, but then I start kind of pivoting and I'm just angry in general that it's just the one swing because that's the whole point of inclusion is that it should be for all kids. Right? That's the whole point. So I'm not mad that these kids want to go on the swing. I'm actually more mad that it's just the one fucking swing.
Yeah.
Have more than one so that everybody can be on them. The parks thing.
They need to consult parents and disabled adults. Like, there's just not enough consultation going on. They just see some ADA guidelines, and they're like, check, 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 check. And then it's like, oh, let's throw a shit ton of wood chips down and not have ramps and, like...
From that perspective, I don't even think just consultation is part of the problem. Why do we not have any disabled people on these committees or working for these parks and recs? Like, what the hell is going on? Because I really think... this marketing ploy, because that's all it is a marketing ploy that they get to call these parks inclusive because it's such bullshit.
And it leaves our kids out.
But it also, the way they design them doesn't always just leave our kids out. It just separates these kids.
Yeah.
It makes it so that, well, this part's only you. And this part's only me. So now you have disabled kids on one section and able-bodied kids on the other. And what are you really doing for inclusion? Because that, to me, is segregation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best park is the one that you can't even tell that it's inclusive, but it actually is.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's the point that so many people don't grasp. You shouldn't look at it and think, oh, well, that's for Lena or that's for Cyrus or, it shouldn't be like that. It should just be a park.
As an architect, I'm designing things all the time for the public, and the best solution, I'm always advocating for accessibility in my work, and it's hard because there's always pushback because it's the easiest thing to disagree with because it's going to be ugly or it's taking away from something else. But the best way to include something that's accessible is to do it covertly. Like, people don't even realize that, like, a really great cane detection bar underneath stairs, if it's done really well, it's beautiful. But if you say, oh, I have to put this stupid thing underneath the stairs because someone could walk and hit their head, like, you're coming at it the wrong way. And so there's tons of ways to make something accessible and inclusive just by making it covert and not making it so obvious that it's a medical thing or that it's specifically for someone, and everyone can enjoy it. There's installations that I've seen people go to where there's lots of projections and lights. These are awesome installations, but it's awesome for everybody. But it's also awesome for someone who has CVI.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that's the beauty of design is that you can nurture that creativity. I think some people try to almost stunt it by being like, oh, well, no, it's
they make
it's
it
ugly.
Like,
but you
it
can
has
make
to be
it
obvious, but it doesn't.
Yes,
have to be.
but it doesn't. And that's part of design is trying to figure it out or create something that looks good but is functional. That's the whole point. I don't know why you're in that field if you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I really thank you so much, Greg, for your perspective and chatting with us today. I'm super excited for everyone to hear this episode, and do not forget that you can totally reach out to Adapted Design on Instagram if you want to commission anything for a loved one in your life, or if you yourself are disabled and you need a hookup, you've got Greg.
We'll link you below, Greg, so anyone can find you and reach out to you and commission you for the holidays especially. And let's get some toys and functional products in the hands of families and disabled adults and these kids, and let's just make everybody's lives so much richer.
Great, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into the Bitching and Bolusing podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, thanks for listening to the Bitching and Bolusing podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe for future episodes. Previous episodes can be heard on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. If you like what we said, please be sure to give us a share. You can follow us on Instagram at Bitching and Bolusing. And you can visit us at www.bitchingandbolusing.com.